course, climate change. COP27 also seeks to renew solidarity between countries to deliver on the landmark Paris Agreement for people all over the world and on our planet. At Ake Festival, although we are primarily a cultural and literary event, we recognize the need for all sectors of our country to begin to put the issues pertaining to the environment and climate change front and center. In the 9 years of running Ake Festival, we always have a panel discussion which invites experts to speak to us about climate change, to make sure that we're aware of its impact on our daily lives, to remind us how we can collectively slow down the destruction of our planet and keep it green and livable, to help burn it into our minds that today's actions or inaction will be felt by generations to come. To borrow a well-used metaphor, when your house is on fire, the conversation about dousing the flames cannot and should not be limited to those in the kitchen. All hands must be on deck, and everyone must do their part, most especially those of us who describe ourselves as artists and creatives. It's such a beautiful thing to see writers deploying their art and using their creativity to get this message to a wider audience. When many more of us internalize the threat of climate change and the centrality of communication, which is our currency, I have faith that they will help people understand that we now face an existential crisis and that there are things that we can all do now. Today we will hear from the experts, Africans who have devoted their professional lives to taking action to mitigate the effects of climate change. We have some interesting and inspiring guests who will tell us about what they're doing and give us some ideas of how we can each personally make a difference. One panel will focus on the incredible work that women are doing on the planet, on the continent, and the other panel will focus on youth responsibility and action. I know that many of you are excited about the results of our Climate Change Poetry Prize. As you know, the age for entries was 18 to 35. In other words, this prize was targeting the youth very deliberately. Over the last few weeks, we have worked through 564 entries, from which the judges, Tade Ikpadiola, Hawa Saleh, and Ife Paul Azino, selected a long list of 9 and then a short list of 3. I wasn't one of the judges, but I read all the submissions anyway. I suppose I was on a roll because I'd been reading the submissions for Ake Review. I found the experience very moving. It was inspiring to see so many Nigerians, young Nigerians, thinking deeply about the problems the world is facing. I was very impressed to read how well informed the youth are and to see how well they understand the urgency of the situation. It made me very optimistic, but you will see what I mean when we get to listen to the shortlisted poems. Before I go, I would like to thank my incredible team for their work. Tobe, Ayomide, Toke, Maimuna, Kendi, and Blessing. I appreciate your support so much. Thank you for caring about this work that we do as much as I do. I hope I have whetted your appetite for today's program. So without further ado, we'll dive straight into our first panel and I'll hand you over to the moderator, Olaokun Shoyinka, to do the introductions. Thank you and welcome again.
Thank you, Lola. Good morning, everybody who is here, and good morning also to everybody who is joining us online, and welcome. Before we launch into the first panel, I would just like to reiterate or re-emphasize what Lola has said. We are in an emergency, and it's time we really started to communicate this. I'm as guilty as anybody. I've known and paid attention to climate change for many years, but the lack of knowledge about what to do, whether individually or within my sphere of influence, has probably held me back from doing what I should. We need to learn what we can do to mitigate the effects of climate change, and we need to also communicate to others what they can do. So that is the aim, and that is what we want to learn from the experts we've got here today, and it's my pleasure to introduce the members of the first panel, which is about African women driving African solutions to climate change. The members of the panel are Nolanla Radebe. I'm sure she will correct me for my poor pronunciation. Oladosu Jeremiah Ademola, who I think is here with us physically. Please give him a round of applause. And Joan Bishio, who is also joining us online. Do you prefer to be addressed as Demola or Jeremiah? Anyone? Okay, I'll call you Demola if that's okay. Good. So let me just check who is with us online. Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello, yes, I can.
Great, great, great. And who do we have? Okay, this is Joan. Good morning. And I think the lady we saw in the car trying to get through the traffic is Nolanla. Am I correct? I think there's probably a bit of delay. Let me go straight ahead and just tell you a very little bit about each of our panelists. I'm sure they'll tell us more detail as we move along. Nolanla Radebe currently works for Gender CCSA and the University of Johannesburg Center of Ecological Intelligence, CEI. Her current designation is as a climate scientist, a gender activist, and academic researcher. Nolanla currently has a social enterprise which aims to empower small-scale female farmers. That sounds very interesting. We look forward to hearing more about that. Ademola Oladosu is a climate change activist and a democratic evangelist. And that's a man after my own heart. I think I will adopt that for me too. And he's a freelance journalist. He's the co-founder of Iliad Climate Foundation with his sister, Adenike Oladosu. The topic is women, so I'm just stressing this because you will say, well, we're talking about women and climate change. Why is he here? But he's actually 50-50. He's representing his other half, his sister, who is already on her way to COP27. Unfortunately, she therefore cannot join us. Demola works as a freelance journalist with the Nation newspapers. And Joan Bishio is best known as a climate activist and a sustainability creator. She shares content on her journey towards imperfect sustainability. Again, that sounds like me. And educates about climate change from a Nigerian point of view. She is the communications manager for EcoBarter, a sustainability startup. So, with the introductions done, I would like to start with our online guests. And maybe we can start with you, Joan. Just give us a further introduction, stressing the parts you wish us to know more about, and tell us what you're doing with regard to climate change. Joan?
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for having me, Sheikh, and I'm glad to be here. So, as stated, I'm what I'll call an eco creator. I create anything that concerns the earth, and my sole purpose is for people to want to love the earth. I want to make you want to love caring for the earth. I want to make you love environmental sustainability. I want to make you love taking care of the earth, and that is why I started creating content about environmental sustainability, especially from a Nigerian point of view, being that there is a huge gap when it comes to climate education in Africa and in Nigeria as a whole. And social media, digital media has made it easier for a lot of people to celebrate things that they want to see, create changes, influence changes, celebrate lifestyles. And the number one type of lifestyle that we ought to be celebrating and talking about in all spheres is not really talked about as much. Sustainability. Sustainability is actually a lifestyle, is a mindset, and it's not just about taking care of the environment. It's about thinking about what will happen tomorrow. If I use everything today, what can I leave for whoever is going to come after me tomorrow? That is what sustainability is. And I am trying to create that illusion and show people that this is what it actually is, and not just about taking care of the earth, but actually taking care of yourself and taking care of future generations to come. That is what sustainability is, and that is what I try to share in my content. I also try to educate about climate change, being that even though Nigeria is one of the countries, because we're in Africa, Africa is is a continent that is experiencing climate change, the effects of climate change rapidly, but there's not as much climate education to what is plaguing us. And that's why people like me come out there to show you that this is what is happening and this is why it is happening to us. And this could be what we could do to reduce the effect of what is happening to us. Just shouting out there and making our voices heard, and not just being in the room of mainly Caucasian people, but also showing that Black people, this is what's happening to us, and representation matters.
Thank you very much for that. Your enthusiasm is already shining through. Question before we move on. How many years have you been involved in this? How long have you been doing this?
Okay, I've been creating content for 1 year plus. That's when I officially started creating content and being a climate advocate for 1 year plus.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll be back to you.
After the pandemic, thank you.
Carry on.
Okay, especially after the pandemic and the lockdown, and I began to see how human activities actually affected the environment, how just a few months of us being locked down in one place brought sanity to the environment. And then I realized that sometimes a lot of us don't even actually understand how the things we do. Just every day I go to work, I come back, I eat what I eat, and I dispose my waste, how it is actually affecting the environment on a larger scale. And that was what prompted me to start sharing my journey and educating people about what they could do and what they could have, alternatives that they could use to just make the earth a better place for everyone.
Thank you. That's a very good point. I think probably everyone here shared that experience, that something that we may have thought might have taken maybe months or even years in terms of the environment recovering from the impact of our activities, but it literally started happening within weeks. And if you go and have a look on the internet and try and find some stories, you'll be actually quite amazed at the speed with which normal life, the ecosystem managed to recover from the damage that our activities were causing. So we're still on more detailed introductions, and I'd like to go over to, if she's Nolanla. Can we go to Nolanla Radebe, please? And hope she can hear us still. It's always a danger when someone is moving in a vehicle because they move in and out of reception, good reception areas. Hello, Nolanla, are you with us? If we can't get her, we move over to... Okay, while we're trying to... If you can try and link up with her in the background while we're chatting with Demola, please confirm that she's with us and she can hear us. So, Demola, same question to you, really. Just give us an introduction and tell us what keeps you busy with regard to climate change. And sorry, and also it's about the organization you co-founded with your sister.
Good morning, people. My name is Ademola Oladosu. I am a freelance journalist, an activist, and a medical student. We founded I Lead Climate as a process of us trying to fight against environmental instability. We in Nigeria, or in Africa, we have this laissez-faire attitude against environmental instability. And in that,
I don't think you can hear me. I can't unmute on my end.
Okay. Okay. Part of the reasons why we established I Lead Climate is to fight for democracy. One of the former president of America, Bill Clinton, said that he fears about climate change because climate change is the only thing that can destroy civilization. Now you might reason that what happened to climate change, democracy, and gender? We are seeing the impact, especially in Africa, we are seeing the impact of climate change on our governance system. We can see the farmers-herdsmen conflict. My sister is a first-class graduate in agricultural economics, and she did it in a university where there's this in Makurdi, where there's this farmer-herdsmen conflict. And she started this I Lead Climate issue when they kidnapped these Chibok girls. She called me that night. She was a 400-level student. She said, how do you think that? Because she knows me as an activist. I was doing my undergraduate studies then, chemistry, BSc chemistry. I told her that this is due to the impact of climate change. People think that it's a religious crisis. We are seeing the water, the Lake Chad receding due to the effect of climate change. And in that process, it's leading to a lot of armed banditry, as we see it in the mid belt of Nigeria. We are seeing the Fulani men fighting with the farmers due to the decrease in crop yield, due to the rainfall. Rainfall is getting less, and we are seeing that the farmers don't have much of the lands again. Most of the lands are being used for building and for a lot of non-agricultural purposes. And in that process, we are seeing that there's now a conflict between the herdsmen and the farmers. And as a result of that, people think that it's a religious crisis because the farmers are Christian and the herdsmen are Muslim. So, but the impact of it, and I just want to, when I was watching the last 2019 election, the debate, Osibanjo made mention that the problem of the farmers herdsmen conflict is climate change. So we are seeing the government accepting responsibility, and that is what we are doing at I Lead Climate. We are trying to fight for women's rights, and that was the reason why she became an ecofeminist, because our view was that women's rights, we can't get women's rights right without having the environmental rights right. So we situate the crisis that is coming from because our focus is on Lake Chad, water resources. We are seeing that high temperature is leading to receding of water. The water is getting less. And this youth can be recruited into armed banditry when the government is not functioning. When the local governments are not functioning, the state governments are not functioning, and you see a group using religion, a form of religion, but under the surface is the water crisis occurring at that region. And she has gone over the world she's gone to Germany, gone to a lot of countries to tell them this is the reason why you are seeing this effect. And due to the scarcity of that water, 30 million people depend on it. And so when the water resources is getting smaller, you are seeing a lot of conflicts. A lot of youths that don't have hope will be recruited into armed banditry. And we are seeing this in spreading from the northeast of Nigeria down to the north central. There was a man, a TV man was saying, he said, these Fulani people, we have lived together with them for over 150 years. How come that now we are having the impact? Thank God for the vice president, who is a very knowledgeable man, a professor of law, saying that this is climate change. And that's what we want to do. We want to enforce government to tell them that climate change is the problem. It's not religion. It doesn't have to do with ethnicity. This is the basic problem. And because we believe that without taking climate change serious, we might have a very multiplying effect. We call that one multiplying effect. And that is what we do, I and my sister, to ensure that women are not impacted. We have a lot of statistics that we have done. We have a lot of studies that we are carrying out. And this thing is telling us that, yes, women are most affected because women are the keepers of the environment. They are the ones that have the environment. The man is to go to the farm, put the ridges. It's the women that goes there to harvest it. So when there's a climate change crisis, there will be crop failure. Once there's crop failure, you can see a lot of things that will happen in multiplying effect. A lot of youth will just be used. Somebody will just come. Yes, we just use the Bible or the Quran. Oh yeah, you should come. And many people will come into that kind of group because they don't have livelihood again. So if you look at the crisis that we are seeing in Nigeria, it's spreading. And you can see from the north central, it's now spreading down to the southwest. I come from Oyo State, and we see the impact in places. When I was telling my dad, we live peacefully with the Fulani people. We live peacefully. So how come? And now we are seeing pockets of violence due to the effect of climate change. So if we don't take it, there will be a time that there will just be war, and all our money will be spent on security, as we are seeing now. And democracy cannot survive. We are seeing in the northwest, the governors are saying election might not hold. So at the end of the day, the governors went to meet Buhari and told them elections might not hold because of the effect we are seeing. And it's climate change that's the basis of it.
Some basic technology challenges here. My knowledge. Thank you so much for that. Some very, very interesting points there. And I think one of the main ones, which goes back to this issue of communication, is that some things are not obvious. They're not obviously connected to climate change. Maybe if we manage to communicate that to people, they will get more alert to the existential crisis we're facing. A quote that's stuck in my head that's been with regard to Africa and climate change is that Africa is sleepwalking towards disaster, and because we're not picking up this message. Now, we've all witnessed the floods, and we can logically make a connection between floods and climate change. But how many of us made that connection between climate change and violence and insecurity? How many people are making the connection between climate change and food insecurity, unemployment, inflation, and so on? Once we make those connections, I think we'll begin to feel the urgency of the situation, and it's about communicating. So with that, I would like to see if we're back in touch with Nolanla. Not yet. Okay. So we'll carry on with the discussion, and I'd like to go a little bit deeper into some of these issues. So hopefully we're still with Joan. Are we still with Joan? Okay. Hello there, Joan. Right. I hope you're able to hear the excellent points made by Demola. I would like to ask you to address anything you wanted to respond to in what he said, but also if you could tell us right now you are a communicator. You create content. You have a direct metric of what people tend to pay attention to, what gets the most views, what messages get across. These are things we all need to learn about. So in addition to addressing any of the comments, Demola's comments you wish to, could you also round off with a few pointers as to what works with regard to communicating, particularly to specific groups like women and the youth? Were you able to hear that?
Yes, I think from your question, you were asking what metrics works for communicating climate change to the audience, right?
Yes. What have you seen that works well and what doesn't work?
What works is when you are practical, when the communication you're trying to share is practical and it's something that they can relate to. Before I started content creation, when I was looking out for people who were also in the same space in Nigeria, there were very few. And it was mostly civil society groups. And sometimes the mode of approach was usually based on what they had seen in the global north. And our situations are different. How in the global north, when you tell them that the ice caps are melting, polar bears are going extinct, they will understand and they're like, okay, but you cannot tell that to Nigeria. What concerns in Nigeria with ice caps? So, like trying to when you're sharing the message or when you're communicating to them, it has to be practical. Now that the floods are here, you're not telling them that this is why it's happening. Do you know why these floods are here? Do you know why these floods are this disastrous? Yes, they told you that they are draining dams, but do you know why they have to drain the dams? Because the rainfall has increased. And do you know why rainfall has increased, even when we did not expect it? Because climate change, and that is why they're draining of these things. And also, do you know how you have affected this? Because, and do you know that the floods wouldn't have been this disastrous if we had done some other things. These are ways that we could actually effectively pass the message to them to make them realize that, the fact that I do not have effective drainages actually made the effect of these floods worse for me and my community. What can I do to make it better? The fact that I am throwing away all my trash in drainages, the few drainages that we have, is actually affecting this and multiplying the effect of climate change for me is ways that we could be able to pass the message, and it works. And even though it's a behavioral thing, because a whole lot of us, especially in Nigeria, we've grown up we buy things, we throw things away in drainages, so there are no dustbins, and we wait for the government. We are always waiting for the government. So it's going to take a while, but the fact that you're going to be taking small, concise steps to tell them that you could do this, you have the power in your hands to at least mitigate climate change to be. And also, you also have power in your hands also to demand more from the government. We think that it's only when we tell the government to build roads and do water for us that we are demanding from the government. Even climate mitigation strategies and policies are also ways that we can demand from the government. And the people need to also understand that it's not only roads you should ask for, not only security you should ask for, also ask for how they are going to work about climate change. Election seasons are here. Are we asking the hard questions, the candidates? Are we asking them what are their climate policies? What are they going to do? Now that the floods have come, what are they going to make sure that next year we do not experience even half of what happened this year? Over almost half of the country was underwater, and it could have been avoided. Yes, floods are natural disasters, but because they are caused by rainfall, they are disasters that could be managed, and we could not manage it, and it became this bad. So when we are communicating, it has to be practical, it has to be relatable. We also have to be empathetic, because climate change affects different people, different stratas, in different social classes, and we have to be able to make sure that we are communicating based on what actually affects them. Deforestation is actually a thing and is also contributing greatly to climate change. But you cannot go to someone in rural Nigeria and tell them that don't cut trees again because you are contributing to climate change. We are losing our carbon sinks. But what am I going to use to cook? I cannot afford to buy gas. Gas is almost like 10 to 11,000 for 12.5 kg. I cannot see that kind of money to buy gas. So what am I going to do? When we are communicating, we should also not just tell them the problems. It also has to come with solutions, ways that they can go around it. Present your alternatives to them. Yes, the floods are here. You couldn't do much about it, but this is what you could also do to reduce it next year. Or this is what you could also do to make sure that it's not that bad for you next year. Cutting down trees are bad. Yes, it's bad and all, but this is what you could use. And okay, you might not have the resources to do this. Let us help you also bring the resources that help you get alternatives to cutting down trees and using them and making us lose our carbon sinks. This communicating the problem is one, but also while we are communicating the problem, we should also put the solution at the end of it, because most of them cannot figure out what the solution is. And so it's our role as communicators that as we are communicating the problem, we are also presenting solutions to them.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Yes, I think she deserved that. I would like to check in with Nolanla and see if we've managed to connect. Can you hear me? Are you with us? Are you hearing us, but we're not hearing you? Okay. Let me come back to you, Demola. Yes. Oh, first of all, I should apologize to you. Your NGO is called I Lead. Yes. I think I called it Iliad. I don't know who's watched Handmaid's Tale as a Gilead. So I think that was in my head. But I Lead, I think, puts across a better message. So perhaps you could tell us a bit about what you do with I Lead, and also I'll offer you the same chance to respond to any of the points that Joan made.
Thank you, sir. We established I Lead Climate based on the impact of climate change on women and democracy. It's Hello? Yeah. It's a strategy to fight against the impacts of climate change on democracy and women's rights. It's a strategy. It's a strategy.
Yeah,
it's a strategy to fight against the impact of climate change on women's and democracy. And we are believers in the principles of democracy. That for Africa to move forward, we have to have a strong democratic framework. Like what Obama said, we must build strong institutions and not strong leaders. So once we have, because in the United States and especially in the Scandinavian, they have strong institutions. These societies have equality for women than Africa. And so what are the things that can lead to women not having equal stand in the society? Climate change can also contribute. And this is the area that we are looking at. Because we started from the kidnap of those school girls. We believe that it has an environmental impact. We are not looking at it from a religious impact. We are looking at it that is the shrinking of the lake charge that caused is one of the effects. It's a secondary cause. Let's say the primary cause, you can say religion, okay, secondary cause. The secondary causes of these things. Because once people have food in their stomach and they have capacity, the economy, they will not go into war. They will not go into war against the states. So these are the impact that we are looking at, and that is why we started this ecofeminism as a strategy. It's only it started as a French concept. Ecofeminism is a French concept, and we are trying to bring that kind of thinking to Africa, that we have to fight climate change through an ecofeministic lens. The ecofeministic lens requires us that women are the most vulnerable to climate change, because by the time the impact of climate change comes, which you address, as my sister is an agricultural, he studied agricultural science in the university, and so she believed that women are the guardians of the of the environment. Once there's a crop failure or there's low yield of crop, the impact will be much on the women and girls. And so in that bid, we have been able to give fertilizers to women in our communities, especially in North Central. We are able to distribute liquid fertilizers to women in rural areas and some urban cities. And this impact is to cushion the effect of climate change on women, because we believe that once the woman is empowered, you have empowered the society. So, yeah, and also my own front is my own. I'm concerned about democracy. I believe in a democratic framework, and I believe that climate change might lead to the failure of democracy in Nigeria. IPCC, which is a scientific body for climate change, world scientific body, they won a Nobel Prize in 2007, Nobel Peace Prize in 2007, and they gave them based on their ability to fight against climate change. And they have accepted that it's only in Africa that climate change is leading to conflict. It's only in Africa that it's leading to conflict. It's not leading to conflict in the US. It's not leading to conflict in Europe. But it's only in Africa. We can see it in the farmer-herdsman conflict. And we, as Elite Climate, we are advising the government through our write-ups, like what he said. How are we communicating? We are communicating. We have a blog. We have a website where you can, womenandcrisis.com. We publish. You can go there and see our essays, publish weekly essays. We release a lot of videos, and we do a lot of production to ensure that we fight against the effect of climate change. And this Swedish lady, we started this Friday for Future in Africa. I and my sister, we started it, the climate strikes in Africa. She contacted us. We are the ones that help her to spread the message in Africa, I and my sister. But when we saw that it's an European thing, it's not working in Nigeria, after a year we couldn't go, because most of the schools are saying you want our children to go out of schools, not to attend schools.
Can you explain what that was? Fridays for
Future, Greta Thunberg.
Oh,
Greta Thunberg.
Okay.
That's teenage Swedish girl. So she contacted us. We started the campaign for her in Africa. So we are the one that started the climate strike when she started in Sweden. So she contacted us. We help her to take that movement within schools. Every Friday they come out in Europe, in America, school children, they protest for their future. And so we believe that we need to allow African children to do that. But we changed the strategy, because most of the schools were complaining that how will you be depriving our children every Fridays from school? So we changed the strategy to involving going to schools, telling them about climate change. And you can see it on my sister's Twitter account. She's always educating children, went to universities, and we are also thinking of establishing programs in some schools. Like the school I'm thinking of establishing a climate change club as a bid to fight against climate change. So we have to know that if we don't fight against climate change in Africa, it will fight against us. The Europeans are seeing it. They are seeing the impact. They are seeing the effects. You might just feel that, climate change is not important. But by the time you see the multiplying effects, because by the time you know that one of the effects of climate change in Africa is low crop yield, by the time the farmers no longer have the ability to to farm due to the weather conditions, due to environmental disaster, it will lead to poverty. And we know the effect of poverty in the continent of Africa. Poverty will lead to a very weak democratic framework. How can democracy strive in a place where there's poverty? It can't strive. Democracy is thriving in Europe and America because of the strong fight against poverty. But once people are poor, they are less of humans. They are less of humans. They don't think like humans again, because his reasoning is less. He can receive anything that he likes. So by the time, even the research I'm trying to do is to look at the impact of climate change on the 2023 election. So that's my own personally. How in places of environmental disasters, how is climate change leading to, how can democracy work in places that have less climate disasters? That's my studies after the election. That, okay, what is the impact? Is there vote buying there? Is there vote rigging there? Because I believe there will be vote buying there in places where people don't have food to eat. You can use a politician will just go there, carry his money, and believe that he buys votes there and sells people conscience. So we have to know the impact, because by the time we fight against the impact, farmers will have food on their table. Fishermen will go out to get fishes to sell. A lot of people and things, because someone that is well fed, you cannot come and tell him that go and carry gun. He's not going to do that. He'll say, no, I'm okay. You will not be able to do that. And that's why it's not occurring in these developed countries, because everybody, the societal income is okay. So climate change is a recipe for disaster if you don't. And I want to thank this organization for their thoughtfulness in trying to fight against climate change, trying to protect for the future of the yet unborn. Because by the time we add climate change to Nigeria's problem, I think it's only God that will just help us.
Hello, thank you very much for that, and we'll come back to some of those comments you made. But I think finally we've got Nolanla with us. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can
Hello?
hear you
Can
now.
you hear
Yes,
me?
we can hear you now.
Oh,
Have you been
wonderful.
able to hear some of the discussion that already happened?
I did try and follow what was being said, because for some reason I could hear you, but I couldn't speak because something's wrong with the microphone.
Okay.
Nevertheless,
Anyway,
I had prepared some notes for this meeting. So I'll start with that. I'll start with the introduction. So first of all, thank you so much for awarding me the opportunity to be part of this very important conversation. Apologies once again for the technical glitches of trying to sign in. So I work for an organization called Gender CC Southern Africa, Women for Climate Justice. It's a non-governmental organization that works with women, experts, organizations, and activists for women's rights, gender equality, and climate justice in the Southern African region. With agriculture being one of South Africa's key economic drivers, Gender CC SA has partnered with farming cooperatives in different regions to reduce poverty through increased climate resilience and aims to reduce climate vulnerability at grassroots communities. So Gender CC is currently implementing the Urban Agriculture Project within the Gauteng province, which is about building sustainable livelihoods for 3 selected female groups in 3 different under-resourced communities. The focus of the project is to build 3 agroecological urban farms, as agroecology has been shown to have a strong positive correlation with climate resilience. So we are focusing on incorporating indigenous seed varieties, increasing biodiversity, and applying agroecological principles that increase the adaptability and reduce the impact of climate change, improve soil health, biodiversity, as well as high diversification within the agricultural production systems. So that's my brief introduction. And from what I can tell, you had asked the question about what are the barriers to understanding climate change in Africa. So I think this is quite a multifaceted question, because in order for governments to be able to make informed and transformative choices concerning climate change, adaptation and mitigation, they require the best and most up-to-date science. So climate information exists that could improve decision-making, thereby mitigating the effects of adverse climate. But at present, this information is seldom incorporated in policy formulation processes and development decisions. And one of the key problems, I think, is also the language that is being used. We have always had our own traditional ways of mitigating climate and environmental issues that are indigenous to us as Africans, such as tree planting days, etc., and certain seasons where people are allowed to plant. When we take transnational interventions and use abstract language, it becomes very overwhelming for the person on the ground. There have always been groups, whether it's women, men, or communities at large, when we would approach issues of dongas collectively and rehabilitate such damages following heavy rains. So maybe we should, as Africans, also consider what used to work. As Africans, my understanding is we would collectively build community dams so that we could have the water for our gardens in our respective villages. So therefore, we should consider going back to some of these basics and reconsider what worked, and then add on new knowledge through campaigns such as what we just had with the Kappa campaign and the grassroots voices campaign that the Amplifying the Voices at Grassroots Level campaign that we just had. So.
Thank you so much for that, and I'm glad we've managed to connect with you. So please stay with us. I want to try and just go over to Joan. Is Joan still online? Okay, while we wait to try and contact Joan, let me just... Joan, hi. Now, I wanted to get a question to you because you moved on to something that's quite dear to my heart, which is the issue of politicians and policy. Now, right now, we're in the campaign season in Nigeria, and actually, I've managed to catch at least two of the candidates and their comments on climate change, and I was severely disappointed. One, in the priority that they seemed to give it. It was almost like, oh yeah, that question. I think one of them was almost like, well, I don't really know much about it, but I'll find out. Another one, I'm trying not to name names or point fingers yet. One just quoted a proverb, and nobody really understood how the proverb related to climate change. But, I mean, you know, we've heard what you have said and what all three of you have said, in that this thing is real and it has direct practical impacts on people, and the politicians need to be seen to take this seriously and to understand it, because the message they send just by their lack of interest is sending out to people, oh, it can't be important because there's a politician who's not paying any attention. So the question to you really is, have you seen this incredible lack of attention being paid? And is there anything we can do right now in this period to make them buck up and start talking sense?
Okay, it's actually appalling, because especially with the way that Nigeria has been experiencing climate change for years now, one would think that at least one or two of the candidates would have like solid policies, or like in their manifesto, or even if it's just promises that they are going to do something about climate change. But as you have stated earlier, it's sad and it's frightening to see that they do not see it as important. They do not see it as important. And I believe this is the time for the climate change civil societies in Nigeria to not just sit down and only talk about climate change in their groups or in their boardrooms, but it's the time for them to now come out and hold them by their necks and by your collars and tell them that you people should not just be dismissing this. This is this. You guys have, at least some of you guys have gone to see the damage that the floods have caused in parts of Nigeria. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? This is time for us to start demanding from them the same way that we are all demanding for strong economic policies, better security policies, better health policies and all that. Climate change should be on top of all that. Because the thing is that maybe, after all, our leaders are also us. They are just a reflection of who we are. Maybe because we do not understand that if our climate is not well, everything cannot be well. We do not understand that. If the climate is not well, the soil will not be well. Food will not be well. Food security will not be well. But security in itself, farmers' herdsmen clashes will continue. Security would not be well. Health will not be well. We will not have good air. We are going to have a lot of diseases. We already, sorry to say, as a country, we are not best in the economic terms. And economically, we are going to continue to die down if the climate is not well. And this is time for us to start making them understand that this thing people are playing about and saying proverbs about and waiting for one climate finance from the abroad to come. Yes, climate finance is very much needed to fight climate change, being that most of us in Africa, being that Africa will not contribute a lot of the carbon emissions that's causing the whole climate change. That is a well-stated fact. But before we wait for the Oyibo people to send the money that will help us mitigate climate change, what are we doing? What are we doing to make sure that we are going to do that? And it's now the time for the civil society, the climate change civil societies, the environmental civil societies, government civil societies to step up and start holding them by their chairs and not just in empty press conferences. What are we going to do now? How are you going to make sure that they are accountable? What policies are you going to make sure that they are accountable for? We shouldn't just, that whole thing that happened and then everybody laughed about it and then the video went viral and everybody laughed about it. We should not be laughing about it. We should be scared.
Yes.
We should be scared the same way that we shout about when some other political statement or bigotry statement is being made. It's the same way we should be shouting when that statement went out. That's the same way, the same energy. That is the same energy we should have when it comes to them dismissing climate change. If they are dismissing climate change, we are all in trouble. That's the truth.
Very true. Very true. Thank you for that. And I was going to try and go over to Nolanla if she's still with us.
Yes, I'm here.
My question to you, well, similar question to you, but I'm interested in the perspective from Southern Africa. Do you find politicians are a bit more aware and a bit more forthcoming with policies, particularly that address women and their role in mitigating climate change?
I think there are some gender-specific problems that we are facing with regards to climate change, because women are disproportionately affected by climate change. So in most cases, I think with reproductive makeup of women, that makes them more vulnerable, like the menstrual health matters, caring for new babies, economically, and climate change hits women the most, and most of this sometimes leads to women becoming sexual property due to desperation to survive or to feed their children. This is because of the existing gender inequalities, which our state, parties, countries continuously fail to address through policies and domestication of regional human rights frameworks. the impact of climate change led to economic issues, which leave women and girls with nothing but their bodies to sell for survival. We have witnessed in some countries families marrying off their young girls so that they can receive something in return to survive. Child marriage is one of the results of climate change. External and internal displacement also leaves women vulnerable. And an example can be drawn from the experiences from Mozambique and has had in the past, leading to the multitudes of people in camps, thus leaving women and children vulnerable and unsafe. One of the effects women faces is a lack of security and safety because of displacement as a result of climate change. So in terms of mitigating the circumstances, empowering women economically, it is key. It will give them independence and reduce their vulnerability. Governments shouldn't leave everything to civil society, but should give civil society the support and guide them in how best to educate communities in languages they understand. International organizations need to work hand in hand with local ones, especially church-based and community-based organizations, to convey a message that's easy to grasp, because it's easy to speak in technical language, which does not help, because the message has to be disseminated to a level where people at the grassroots can understand what exactly is happening, and then there has to be a way of them being able to also be more engaged in formulating responses and having some kind of a participatory method as a form of intervention, which would include a range of activities with a common thread, with the aim of involving ordinary people and providing an appropriate platform for them to play an active and influential part in decisions that affect their lives. So this means that people are not just listened to, but also heard, and that their voices shape outcomes. And I think this is where the critical factor of government comes in, because this has to be a concerted effort. There needs to be a major continent-wide effort as well to integrate climate risk management into climate-sensitive development processes at all levels. And this is quite urgent and must be a top priority, not only in Southern Africa, but I think throughout the whole of Africa.
Very true. So a lot more to be done at the policy level. We're rapidly running out of time, but I would like to get a few questions from others than myself. We do have an online audience as well. If you have any questions online, please try and send them in, and we'll see if we can get them addressed. But otherwise, do we have any questions from the audience for any or all of the panelists? Maybe while we have a question in the front. Can we have a microphone? Microphone to the lady in the front, please.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for all the amazing work you're doing. I have two questions. The first one is, how are you able to reach those communities that are offline? You know, the people who do not have the privilege to be in these settings, because the people who cannot speak English, so how are you able to reach those communities? And the second question is, from what you have been saying, it's obvious that poverty is one of the key factors that is affecting climate change. So, because now a lot of people are actually starving here in Nigeria. I've been covering stories on violence in Northwest, and one of the things that keep coming out is affecting food security, and a lot of people are starving in villages in Zamfara, in IDP camps. And with the issue of cooking with firewood, a lot of them cannot even afford, they don't even always get food. And when you go to IDP camps and you talk to the women, a lot of them, their biggest source of income is selling firewood, and when they actually get something from it, they use that firewood to cook. So how are you able to convince these people who do not have the privilege to think of a bigger world out there, that, oh, this is what they're doing, this is how it's affecting the environment. Because even if you give them money today, what about tomorrow? So I was wondering, is it possible to get the impact that we need if we don't tackle the core issues like poverty, especially considering more people are slipping into poverty day by day? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we can throw those to all the panelists and they can choose which or both. Let me just repeat. Well, the first question was about reaching hard-to-reach community, maybe not online, and also the issue of poorer communities and the use of firewood, getting to convince them to abandon that practice. Let me come to you, Demola. Let me start with you. Any of those questions you'd like to address?
Thank you. Let me address it too. Reaching poor communities. I lead climate. We are doing that. We are going to villages. Especially, we are based in Abuja, so we are going to villages in Abuja to ensure that at least the women have liquid fertilizers. We get them from the southwest, then we give it to them so that they can increase their crop yield. Because you know that those are communities that are impacted by flooding, outbreaks, disasters. We are going there. So that's what we are doing. And they don't speak English, so sometimes we go with interpreters. And number two, again, climate change. You can see hungry and climate change. That's the reason why we are saying hunger. You know, one of the things that we are trying to do also, educating farmers, is that, okay, there's no need for you to burn when you're clearing your farm for this thing. We always tell them you can bury those things down instead of you trying to add to the emission and making the place to be warmer. But in Africa, our temperature is not the real issue because Africa just contributes to 4% of the emission. It's just 4% that we commit, because we are not industrialized. The emission, when I read Bill Gates' book, he released a book on climate change, the solution. Even I reviewed it. I don't know if I can send it to you with the Nation newspaper. I reviewed the book. So what he was saying is that the emission, 90% of it are not in Africa, except cement industry. Those who produce cement is the greatest polluter. So, but most of the emitters are in the European world. So we just emit 4%. Him also is also an emitter. He accepted that blame, that he's also a big emitter, but he's trying to reduce his emission. So the major issue is that in Africa, the major issue is to fight against the impacts of climate change. It's just to fight against the impacts, because we are seeing the impacts in the multiplying effects. And that is what we are doing, the multiplying effect. Okay. Because the emission is not really a problem compared to the United States and Europe.
That's as regard climate change. Of course, there's the whole health issue impact of that, which is a bit different. But so that we can get hear from everybody, let's go to, we have Nolanla here. So did you hear the questions about reaching hard-to-reach communities? And also firewood issue.
I think the recent campaign that Gender CC had the privilege of being a project partner, the Amplifying the Voices of Frontline Communities in Africa, was a very good example of making local communities more engaged in the topic of climate change. And obviously, in order for that to happen, we have to step aside and actually go to these communities instead of like being within our silos and discussing within our academic realm and, you know, having these meetings, but actually going to the communities. And I think this is what we saw quite clearly with amplifying the voices of frontline communities in Africa, that you have to go to the communities if you are wanting to engage with communities. And once you get there, you need to be able to communicate in a manner that is understandable. So you need to also be able to break down the language barrier and have a participatory approach where you also hear from the community members what are some of their concerns. And in certain cases, they even have proposed solutions to some of the things that they are going through. But of course, there are some critical issues such as loss and damage and making big polluters pay, because some of these solutions also require some type of finance. So I think this is one of the most, using the social media as well has been an effective tool, I think, to bring the primary message across from most of the vulnerable communities, as most of the project partners were also tagging other partners. I think this is one of the most effective tools to keep people engaged in discussions on climate change and how they could have an impact on their livelihoods, and to hold big polluters accountable for loss and damage. So with the question on alternative fuel sources, like in this case, this then becomes a point of understanding the point of view of the community members. In most cases, the charcoal, the reforestation, although it leads to reforestation, it's often the cheapest type of fuel that they can afford to cook for themselves and their families. So unless there's an alternative that civil society or government is giving to people to use, which is cheaper or within the same price range, unfortunately, people will continue using those fuel sources. The only way perhaps to mitigate against this would be to run a program where there is reforestation in areas where there's the deforestation, and of course not using monoculture to replant the trees, but having a diversity of trees to promote biodiversity, as well as planting some indigenous tree varieties, perhaps. So there's a trade-off, because on one hand you have to understand as well why people are using the sources of fuels that they're using, and also to be realistic in the sense that we can't just tell people to stop cooking with charcoal as if they've got an alternative. So we need to provide an alternative solution before we start telling communities at grassroots levels to practice other ways of cooking.
Thank you very much for that. And we have just a minute left, which I'd like to squeeze in a final comment from Joan, if she's still with us. Okay. We might have time for a very quick, short, last question. Do we have any more? Any from the online community? Nope. Oh, John, you're back with us. Yeah. Were you able to hear the questions? And if you could, we're almost out of time, but we definitely will squeeze you in. Are you muted? We can't hear you. It might be from our end. You can hear me? Can you hear me? Try again. No, we can't hear you yet. We're not hearing. Okay, that's unfortunate. I will just round up, but if we can get Joan back on while I'm rounding up, then we will come back to you. Otherwise, I think it's been great having just 3 panelists, because that's given us time to hear from all of you. I think we can all agree that the work we are looking at you as people who are actually doing something practical. So you have certainly, I'm sure you have our admiration and encouragement from this side. Also, hearing what you've done has given us ideas about what to do and what needs to be done. And we realize, I think, certainly from the early discussion, that we have a massive interconnection between climate change and pretty much everything, including even democracy. Democracy affects climate change affects democracy, and of course security and food security, flooding, etc., poverty. So I think we can all agree it's an emergency. There are things that can be done, particularly at the policy level, to help encourage groups, specific groups, and we've heard today, I think we've learned that women have a major role to play in addressing the impacts of climate change, but also they are very much up there as the major victims when we do suffer from climate change problems. So I hope the policymakers are listening. At the individual level, there are many things we can do, but the main thing is, one, communicate, and two, let's all get engaged. So can I have a round of applause for our three panelists, please? Thank you very much. And stay with us and listen to the rest of the program, please. Thank you, everybody. I think over to the next part, the next event, which is the next segment, rather, which is a film. Okay. Can we get the others in the background for the photograph?
We're trying to get you. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So next is the film. We're going to be screening Center, and they have given us permission to screen.
Forest cover in Nigeria is less than 10% of what it used to be.
Food production in some communities is becoming a problem.
Communities that have been lost completely in the northernmost part of Nigeria.
So we're having problems from the south and from the north.
Because we sit at this precipice of either huge prosperity or, very huge disasters.
Climate change results in harsh, severe weather.
Things have changed. Things have changed dramatically.
It's real. It's not theory.
Freak weather conditions, floods, droughts.
No one is going to escape. Everyone will be impacted. I repeat, everyone will be impacted.
And we're faced as humans with some very stark choices.
destabilized nature, and our climate is changing. Rising temperatures and shifting weather patterns are disrupting life on Earth. Here in Nigeria, these climatic changes are made worse by destruction of our environment and pollution of our atmosphere. And to make matters more challenging, our rapidly rising population is putting a serious strain on our natural resources. Our actions are having unforeseen consequences on the very environment that sustains us.
Climate change has affected the North more in the sense of challenges with deforestation and desertification.
And we know on record that desertification moves annually about 5-10 kilometers into Sahel savanna.
In this farming community in Katsina, farmers have noticed a change in rainfall in the past 15 years.
Honestly speaking, the farming is very bad, because since from the time we plant our crops up to date, we are experiencing lack of rainfall. We have a problem.
The effect of climate change on desertification is only assisting it, because when it is dry, it's easier for sand and the vegetation to dry up completely and expose the land.
Deforestation is a serious problem, and that there hasn't been any alternative solution to fuel wood for domestic use and other uses.
The people of the Sahel, they are great agriculturists, but because of the climate, which they have little control over, sand dunes overtaking such areas. Such conditions keep on making people to move away from their ancestral homes to other areas.
In northern Nigeria, pastoralists and farmers have coexisted for hundreds of years. There was a lot of nutrients recycling, use of crop residue to feed livestock, and livestock to fertilize agricultural fields.
The traditional migration of Nigeria's pastoral cattle herders is under threat. This is forcing their migration earlier and also further south.
Most of the grazing land and the cattle routes is being affected. In the dry season, a lot of people from the north are moving to Enugu area, Lagos area.
In recent years, rapid population expansions all over the country has driven a lot of competition over access to resources, and that has created a huge challenge. For large-scale upland cultivation, usually barricade hundreds of hectares of land, thereby cutting off pastoralists from accessing patchy areas for grazing or even accessing watering points.
When the land is depleting, those communal clashes, those communal fight for land increases.
The major attack was in 2011 when the Fulanis invaded the Sengef community and killed about 57 people in Tekpa, one single village. They lost about 85 people.
There was a day we caught one of their cows and asked them to come and pay for the damages they caused in the farm and collect their cows, only to see them coming with guns to attack us. That is how it started.
Thousands of herds of animals are hostile by criminal gangs. The victims, who are the pastoral groups, are blamed. A lot of rural agricultural communities have sophisticated guns. They attack the pastoralists, take away their livestock, and therefore, I cannot stand here and say that some of the pastoralists are not armed. Some of them are armed to defend themselves.
Many of the problems are due to criminal gangs on both sides, stealing cattle and destroying crops. Cattle herders were paying for access to grazing, but the money never reached the owners of the land. Attacks and counterattacks have led to a cycle of violence that has its roots in the interplay between climate change and the growing population.
It is becoming increasingly very difficult for this kind of traditional pastoral method of agriculture system to coexist with the increasing commercial nature of agricultural production that is community now. They don't have much empty lands as they were before. This conflict had destroyed our place, had destroyed our economy, had destroyed our people, had destroyed our cherished peace that we always was known for. Our people have become refugees in their own land.
In the Office of National Security Advisor, they're working on a plan to address these things that will include having permanent grazing reserves or having dedicated routes that are safe for these nomadic families to pass through. I think this is a problem that has become a national security concern in recent times with changes in climate and also urbanization, growth in population. So you have a lot of nomadic families who really had swathes of land to move up and down from here all the way across the Sahel, find that they no longer can do that because most of the land is now owned by people.
Lake Chad is the main water source for 70 million people. It was the 6th largest lake in the world in the 1960s. From its original size of 26,000 square kilometers, it has shrank to less than 2,500 square kilometers.
In the early 70s, the Nigerian government established the South Chad Irrigation Project. The major irrigation project takes huge amount of water from the lake. Because of the global climatic change, the volume of water that comes to the lake is also affected significantly. That became a very serious issue of the lake because the rate of recharge was actually not equal to the rate of drainage. If the amount of rainfall that comes into the lake is sufficient like it used to be, then probably we will not be talking about the problem we're having today. So climate change has a very fundamental effect on the changes that we are seeing around the lake today. The lake has a significant impact on the livelihood of the people. And when it dries up, then the people are scattered, confused.
Farmers, herders, and fishermen are now competing for the remaining water. And with decreasing precipitation and droughts due to climate change, conflicts and poverty are threatening the stability of the region.
Most of these communities, which housed more than 5,000 people, had to move to the cities. And the only major city was Maiduguri, the state capital. That's 1/3 of the population of Borno State are now resident in Maiduguri town. Most of the people who go there end up to find out that the jobs are not there, the dreams are not there, and the lifestyle and the hopes are dashed.
So, what else do you expect? You expect anger, you expect frustration. And of course, since the hand is already idle and the mind is a breeding ground, then they can take up arms against anybody. And they will do it with all passion.
They have nothing to do. The fishermen cannot fish anymore. The farmers cannot farm anymore.
Most of these people who come there seeking for job opportunities and do not find, turn to these Islamic clerics. For example, the erstwhile leader of Boko Haram, Yusuf Mohammed, had a welfare scheme. He provided, interest-free loans to membership. And this was how they attract members to the group. Being a member of the group, benefiting from the financial scheme of the group, you are compelled to attend evening Islamic classes and scholarship. And this is where the indoctrination takes place.
So it has to do with certain aspects of alienation and also misinterpretation of religious texts and a search for a common society that's fashioned in the ideology of a few.
Most of these people have left the northernmost part of the state and neighboring states as a result of desertification, deforestation, and this is the link between climate change and the militant Islamic insurgency in the area.
Gas has been flared in this nation for as long as oil production has started.
The gas flaring in Nigeria is the largest single contributor to CO2 in Africa compared to everything else combined.
About 45 million tons of carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere per day during crude oil production.
The gas that's flared is equivalent to the annual amount of gas that's consumed by Brazil.
The amount of gas being burnt is enough to generate power for all of sub-Saharan Africa. And yet we're wasting over $2 billion worth of natural gas every year just going up in smoke. This is really contributing to global warming. And Nigeria can't afford to add up to the problem that we don't have a solution to right now.
Imagine living next to a huge fire every day of your life, giant cigarette, as it were, attached to your entire community that you can never avoid.
So gas flaring causes diseases like cancers, leukemia, causes acid rain because of the sulfur and nitrogen oxides in it. All this affects crops, causes skin diseases, all kinds of breathing difficulties. So gas flaring is actually criminal.
The pollutants released into the atmosphere by gas flaring are not the only harmful side effects of oil extraction. The damage from oil spills on communities and the environment is invasive and sometimes catastrophic.
Yeah, if you look at the level of oil spills going on in the Niger Delta, it's one of the largest levels in the world.
Every single moment, there's an ongoing oil spill in the Niger Delta.
Ikarama in Bayelsa State was once a vibrant farming and fishing community. This is what happens when things go wrong.
Ikarama community has the highest frequency of oil spills in Bayelsa and the Niger Delta as a whole.
This ground is contaminated with the crude oil all over. Maybe you dig, let me say, 2 feet down, 3 feet, you will see crude oil.
Then apart from the oil spills, you're having toxic waste from chemicals used in drilling processes. You're having wastewater that comes from the process of oil drilling.
A place that used to be the food basket of Nigeria, the environment was degraded. Their source of livelihood was destroyed.
Our farms are no longer working well. The crudes kill all our fishes all around us. Food become a problem now.
So you're having food system polluted, water polluted, the land polluted.
The children, they always sick.
But what is causing these spills?
Sabotage has very high percentage. Maybe about 80 or 90% of the spills in such areas are attributed to sabotage. But if you go to some other areas, over 90% are due to equipment failure or operational failure.
So what is happening in Niger Delta is people are spilling oil and nobody is taking responsibility. I don't blame the oil companies alone. I also blame the people that are breaking the pipelines.
But it's more complicated than individuals simply breaking pipelines.
The contractors of the oil companies who have the mandate to clean up after spills occur. Just in case they don't have enough contracts, they do influence a couple of community youths to go and, tamper with something here and there so that they can get the contract to go and clean up after.
They just give the boys about 200, 300,000 naira, and then they smile to the banks.
Post sort of 2009, we've really seen an increase in third-party causes of spills. But that doesn't mean that the oil companies should be let off the hook for several hundred oil spills a year, which wouldn't be acceptable anywhere else in the world.
In the meantime, oil spill follows oil spill. Damage is extensive with virtually no rehabilitation.
The story of Bodo is a sad story. It's 2 spills caused by mechanical failure.
Since oil come here, if you catch fish and you wash it and you tear him better, you go see oil inside. When you just chop and you go hear the odor of kerosene. As you just breathe like this, the odor of kerosene will come out from your mouth.
When the spills occur, tides can carry these oil spills into the mangroves.
As you can see, oil used to be in mangrove.
What has been revealed from the United Nations Environment Programme assessment of Ogoni environment. In fact, at the end, they said it will require 25 years to clean the waters in Ogoniland. More than 3 years after that report has been released, one expected action to be taken to commence cleaning of Ogoniland. But all we're seeing are signposts in communities saying your land is contaminated, keep off. People are just in the middle of villages. People are living right there. And you're telling them the land is contaminated, so you keep off. Where are they going to go to?
Why militancy succeeded in the Niger Delta was the huge neglect. People are still drinking from the river the way they did when I was still a child. No boreholes, no good roads. So where are the money going to? And so when the boys rose up carrying arms, it's like applauding them. The community was applauding them. Yes, a Daniel has come to judgment. Another Izigboro has come.
You know that when somebody is pushing you to the wall, when you cannot bear it any longer, you bounce out. And that's the kind of, any moment now, that is the mood we are in, we will be. As we are giving you good thing, you give us something, we'll take again. It's give and take life. We are in, that's the life we are into.
Our conscience reacts favorably, positively to equal rights and justice.
The effects of an oil spill are easy to see, but its influence on climate change may not be obvious. But when you consider the fact that every tree lost, every plant killed decreases carbon absorption, then the link becomes clear.
On a global level, mangroves are more of an important carbon sink than rainforests. Mangroves are a hugely important natural resource for Nigeria. It's one of the amazing sea defenses that the country has, and it's being destroyed through oil pollution.
These are dead mangroves. This mangrove plant is very, very important to the coastal environment.
These are the plants that God has given us, natural barriers to serve as a buttress to sea encroachment. People who are living in the fishing settlements are cutting this species of plants.
They have finished cutting all the red mangrove. Even the white mangrove has gone. It's supposed to be that as the sea is coming, it is this mangrove plant that is supposed to give the sea a good resistance. All the mangrove is gone, and the sea is having a free way.
The Niger Delta is the third largest wetland in the world. We have almost destroyed our own wetland, and that has a reverberating effect on the entire ecosystem.
These are the major spawning grounds for fish, the fisheries in the region.
And we're destroying that which feeds us. I mean, I don't understand it, and it's very difficult to stop. These are some of the most impoverished citizens we have.
People that have lived in the fishing settlements, they've made me to understand that where they are staying today, it's like the 1 kilometer ahead where they used to stay 7 years ago. So as the sea is pushing them, they are coming out.
You go to Brass, you go to Odioma, Kulama, you see the same thing. Ocean encroachment, eating up the land. And they told me about 7 poles of the electric line has just gone into the ocean.
I was one of the people that used to live far beyond this side.
How the water is washing in, is coming with great current to wash out this Bonny Highland, and if something is not done promptly, this Bonny Highland will be washed out.
In those days, we walked, just as we are walking now, to that ship. You can't go close to it, you can't near it. You will see how the land on the wash level.
And scientists have estimated that if there's a net sea level rise of 1 meter above present levels, up to 90 kilometers off from the coastline will go underwater.
The ocean levels are going to rise substantially for Nigeria. A good portion of Lagos is going underwater. Our coastlines are going to be changed, irrevocably changed.
This estate should never have been built this far out. In Nigeria, we have what are called setbacks. There's a minimum distance from the shore that you are not allowed to put up any structure, and that's primarily for safety reasons. So how this estate was approved to be built up to this point beats me. People are building their houses in areas that used to be swamps before now, and when the rains come, they're flooded. What do you expect? We see that government is the biggest culprit when it comes to non-compliance with environmental laws.
A lot of these new houses that they've been building illegally down along the wetlands are going to be underwater.
We are being pushed, and gradually maybe we'll all go towards the middle belt. People now from the north, they will come down, and then people from the south will begin to go up.
Nigeria is blessed with some of the most ecologically vibrant rainforests in the world.
This small region is one of the top 3 or 4 biodiversity hotspots on the continent. It has a third of all the primate species in Africa, about 40 species. It has animals that are found nowhere else in the world.
The trees held foundations of the soil. They absorb water. They're like canopies to this earth, and our country and our state is being protected by that.
Not to talk of the food, our agriculture. The pollination comes from insects that have habitats in the forest. So if the forest goes, those habitats are lost, and the pollinators will leave, and our agriculture will be affected.
Forest is the greatest reverser of deleterious climate change. It absorbs carbon dioxide and turns it back into oxygen, and that's what we need as a planet.
It is estimated that one tree could sequester about 22 kilograms of carbon in a year. And without these trees, the carbon dioxide is left out in the environment. This causes the higher temperatures that we're experiencing.
Between 2000 and 2007, there was almost 250,000 hectares lost in Cross River State, and about that same amount in the period from 2007 to 2014. If you've taken almost 500,000 in the last 15 years, and you only have a little more than 500,000 left of tropical high forest, then you can do the math.
Unfortunately, Nigeria has a depressing record on deforestation. Commercial logging is lucrative, and when money talks, sustainability is not high on the list of priorities. Beyond that, illegal logging is thriving, so laws and law enforcement often come a distant second.
You've lost 96, 97% of your forests. Well, the country is developing, you've got additional population, everybody wants to build a house, build a hotel, build something, yeah, and it takes wood. In the last year or so, we've seized about 400 chainsaws. We're talking about a loss in excess of 10, 15 billion naira. So there are cartels operating here. They're able to compromise security services with that money. They do not want to give up that illegal revenue. And so they fight to protect it. Well, normally people think about security issues. They're thinking about police and criminal behavior, or Boko Haram, or pirates in the creeks and illegal bunkering. But when you're losing an environment, you have an environmental security. And our environment, our watersheds, our rivers and streams, our ocean, all these things support human life here. And so it becomes a national security issue that if we don't protect our environment, what's going to replace it?
When you lose forest, it doesn't come back. People talk about, oh, cut a tree, replant 2. It doesn't work. The soils here are only a few centimeters thick. When you cut down the trees and you get a rainy season or 2, the soil is gone. And people move in once any timber cutting has occurred, and they plant their farms, and it's never going to go back to forest anyway. That's the God honest truth.
One of the basic needs for survival is agriculture and domestic fuel wood. Sustainability becomes an issue now because the population is ever expanding, but the forest resources are shrinking.
Sweeping erosion is now evident in all parts of Nigeria.
We have huge dead areas that almost nothing will grow. You have erosions which are kind of gone beyond the word erosion to really describe it. It looks like some natural geologic feature. It's so huge.
Climate change exacerbates erosion because climate change results in more intensity rain over a short period of time. When you build up an area, what you are basically doing is you are converting permeable surface to impermeable surface because you are replacing soil with concrete and zinc. So now you are increasing the volume of flow. Right there you have the recipe for erosion. We have people who are depositing refuse in gutters, who are actually blocking the waterways with structures, building structures. When you put all that together, what you're basically doing is you are agitating water. You are creating turbulence.
In about 2-3 years ago, we had a massive landslide that affected the entire ecosystem. And we were telling people not to cut at slopey area because if you cut at slopey area, you farm at slopey area, you let the land loose. You burn, you destroy the soil cohesiveness. And when the landslide came down, everybody's eyes went wide. And they said, okay, this is what we were told.
One of the most striking examples of erosion is Nanka Valley in Anambra State.
Nanka is easily the biggest erosion in Nigeria. What's going on in Nanka is massive. In fact, the way it's going, the Igwe is actually threatened because it's fast approaching his residence.
When I see a joke, incredible Mirianiku, Manton Miri, Maketo, Volosier, I waited to go back to Katanubadi. That was so Bodaida, Troshita.
Villages have collapsed here at Nanka. A lot of people have lost livelihood because of loss in their farmland. But it gets bad when somebody loses his homestead. There was this blind man living in a house, half of which has fallen into the erosion. He's blind, completely blind. He lives in the remaining half. And we asked him, why are you still there? He has no other place to go.
Rural people are most affected by environmental instability. Flooding has permanently disrupted this community.
It started normal, like the normal flood season. That's around May.
The water was coming down from Cameroon to the River Niger, and the rain was so much, raining almost every day, and the rain was heavy.
The floods came without warning, and people were running helter-skelter from we were seeking for where to take refuge. People were living on the main road, cooking on the main road, putting their farms, sleeping there.
Many people died.
The farmers lost their farms, most their crops like yam, cassava, garden egg, okra, and all those were lost.
This is the level of the flood. This is the level.
Heavy flooding like this can cause permanent disruption.
It was impossible for the community to relocate. The community have no other land to go. Where will they now go? Are they going to the upland for another person's community? That's the problem. There's no way to run to.
So we've seen the consequences of our actions. We really can't continue to squander our natural inheritance like this. Is there anything we can do to make a difference? Or is it too late?
Nigeria's electricity sector generates only about a fifth of the country's needs.
As we all know, Nigeria is full of amazing entrepreneurs and potential. What is holding Nigeria back is the lack of access to power.
About 15,000 megawatts are generated from diesel generators alone.
If we get our electrical system up and running in this country, we won't be contributing to climate change.
The gas flaring in Nigeria is a travesty. Addressing that would really do a lot to address global warming and climate change. Nigeria, using domestic gas and flared gas, could kickstart its own domestic energy market.
The number one thing Nigerian government should do is to stop gas flaring. Gas flaring has been outlawed since 1984, but it has not stopped for one day. It's against the law to flare the gas. That's why they pay penalty, and the penalty is neither here nor there. So the government should now wake up to its responsibility. We can't afford that wastage. We can't keep on postponing something that is killing our people, something that is wasting our resources, and something that is harming the planet and the people and everything in it.
How could you live in a place that has abundant gas and live in darkness?
This is the moment in which Nigeria can decide if it really wants to kickstart its domestic gas market. If you have one flare that's maybe the equivalent of 35 megawatts of power, why not convert half of that, say, into local power opportunities through a containerized, plug-and-play gas-to-power solution? Some people may say, oh, that sounds quite technically challenging, but actually it's not. It's a basic diesel engine, but with a bit of tweaking, you can run gas through it. If the policy environment is right, you can get these things up and running within 6 months. It's going to employ tens of thousands of people and give energy security for Nigeria. Imagine if giving that economic boost to the country can also reduce the environmental devastation that's happening around gas flaring.
Solar and wind electricity can answer the basic power needs of remote and difficult-to-reach communities and contribute to Nigeria's grid.
Nigeria is one of the few countries in the world that has in abundance almost every source of renewable energy.
This is 10 megawatts Katsina wind farm. And the essence of this project is to generate electricity using our natural resources.
We have a wind velocity of about 8 meters per second, which is by global standards one of the highest in the world.
So by the time we have this 10 permanently on the grid, find out that half of the energy need of the state will be met.
Wind power projects such as this require federal government resources, but solar power can be a small-scale alternative. The Human City project in Port Harcourt is doing just that.
Because we have such terrible municipal provision of electricity, we have a really brutalized environment.
Sometimes we may have a program, our gen will be outside making a lot of noise. Thank God we have a solution to it.
Every part of Nigeria, we have enough solar radiation and penetration.
The impact, not only on us, to the community, is really huge. Each time you go there, you see people come there to charge their phones when there is no light.
I tell people that this is the free gift God has given to Africa, and for those of us in a place like Nigeria, we can depend entirely on solar.
This solution is exactly what could be done to power up the rural population.
The most reliable and dependent source of domestic energy is fuel wood. People are cutting down the forest, whether for food, whether for firewood, is based on economic reasons. And so of necessity, the intervention must be economic.
The improved cook stoves are more efficient because they have better insulation and the heat is channeled directly to the pot rather than being spread out. So food cooks faster and you use less firewood. With 3 very small sticks, you can easily cook a pot of rice and beans.
This simple solution is not restricted to home use.
A typical bakery in Jigawa uses 1 tree to bake in a day, 30 trees each month, and given that there are 300 bakeries in Jigawa, that would be about 108,000 trees every year that are being cut down just to fulfill the demand for bread. So the improved rocket ovens are an efficient technology that we're introducing to bakeries to help them reduce the amount of firewood that they require to bake bread.
You could use a tenth of the amount of wood that you used before. So for instance, the same tree that you used to bake bread for just 1 day, you could use it for 10 days. And that changes the dynamics, that changes the equation. And that's the power of technology, that's the power of changing the way you do things.
Wanda wannan babu shan wuta sosai ba kamar yadda wannan zaka ji zafi. Biredi yana fitowa da kyau ba toka ba wani datti.
This is one of those cases where little drops can make a mighty ocean. So if all of us think of little ways in which we can contribute and make a difference, just little adjustments to our lives, all of that could add up to make this huge difference, turn this situation around.
At current growth rates, the population is expected to rise from about 175 million to 450 million by 2050. Feeding that population is the next big challenge. The solution may well be on our doorstep. The Songhai Agricultural Initiative provides training on modern sustainable farming methods suitable for local conditions. It aims to repopulate rural areas with productive farmers to boost food production.
Increase in population is going to be serious and will have serious implications on food security. Without food security, there is no other security. And agricultural production and productivity are key.
Our production is, first of all, a production that is respectful of the environment.
Nothing gets wasted.
We don't throw anything away in Songhai. Like the waste from the dropping, use food for the agriculture, the waste for the fish, we can use the water to irrigate our production. You know, it is just a cycle.
We practice our own modern farming. Never in the history of the North is plantain and banana planted. The Songhai is doing it. All year round, our garden is green. We don't burn bush here. It destroys the microorganisms that are nutritious to our plants.
Songhai is an example of how to react proactively to new challenges.
This is nature as it was intended to be. But when we think of climate change, we think of science and something that's abstract that doesn't affect us. But climate change is about what we have done to this. We can continue doing what we do, or we can make changes. We have a choice.
Nature has been very generous to Nigeria and to Nigerians, and we can't just destroy and consume everything that nature gave unto us. What we call natural resources are not just things we put on the market for economic purposes, they're things that build our very life.
The environmental challenges we have in this country are going to have long-term consequences. A lot of Nigerians are so busy trying to make money, they really, really don't care about environmental issues, and I think they should.
%70% of Nigeria's population are below the age of 35. That tells you that in the near future, you are going to have a huge population. And the challenge with huge populations, growing populations, is how do you take care of everyone? We need to start seeing our environment as a resource that we need to conserve, we need to preserve, and we need to protect.
We need to respond to the risks that we're creating. But if slowly, steadily, we start real conversations about real issues, about what really matters, about actual value, about what we're living for, about what we're spending energy for and on, then our values will start to be reflected in our politics, in our institutions, and in the spaces in which we live.
Who
has the right to use up his own children's birthright? Who has the right to use up something he received from his forefathers and use it up and not pass it on to his children?
If we just go the way of grabbing and not putting anything back, it affects our psyche, it affects the way we think, it affects who we are. We are not by nature people who destroy, people who just grab.
No longer just take from this land and not give back. Pretty soon, that account is going to be empty, and then the real suffering and poverty is going to start in this country. It's everybody's issue, it's everybody's problem, and it's going to take everybody to solve and protect what we have remaining in Nigeria. That change starts at home. Yeah, are you living in an environmentally friendly way in your own compound? Are you throwing trash over the wall? Are you pouring oil out on your driveway that goes into the water and the storm drains into the rivers? I mean, are we being responsible citizens here? And once the damage is done, you can't put it back. There's not enough money to do that.
I like to say we're not apart from nature. We are part of nature. This is what helps to build a system that is truly resilient and can give us hope for the future. So we need all of us, all Nigerians, all Africans, all citizens of the world. We have a stake in what happens to the planet because we have only one Earth.
introduction, which I'm sure will be every bit as enlightening as the first one. We have two panelists who I would like to invite up onto the stage. Can I call on Joanna Chikezie? Good morning, welcome. And Sheikh Awubajo, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Remi Dodo Awubajo. You can do better. I know you're hungry, but you can manage a better round of applause. Great. Well, it's good morning and welcome to both of you. It's great to have you, much as it's nice to have people coming in online. I think it's more relaxing, at least for the moderator, to have you both physically present. So welcome and thank you for coming. I'm going to do just a short, quick intro for both of you while you gather your thoughts, and then we'll hopefully have a good chat about Lagos underwater, youth response to climate change. Of course, we're not going to restrict our discussions to Lagos, but it's really just to evoke that imagery of what has been happening all over in many parts of Nigeria, and of course, sadly, what we've just seen on that film, which I have to say it was riveting, it was enlightening, but it was depressing. But I hope that we can turn that particular emotion into more motivation to talk and to communicate and to act. So Sheikh Awubajo was born and bred into an indigent home in the Bariga community in Lagos. Developing his talents for theatre and deep love for children's education at an early age, Sheikh is now an internationally renowned children's theatre expert who is passionate about community development through the arts. In 2005, he founded Footprints of David Arts Foundation and also an academy to train and develop children's interest in the creative arts and education. The Academy has, since its founding, performed at local and foreign festivals. Its scope has widened to include, amongst other initiatives, Free Slum School Project, a Bariga Adult Literacy Center, and a theater facility. Sheikh is an alumnus of the Lagos Business School and an Acumen Fellow of the 2021 set. And for his work and entrepreneurship, Sheikh has won several international awards. And we'll get into a lot more detail about his incredible spread of activities. But welcome, please, another round of applause for Sheikh. Joanna Chikezie is an award-winning entrepreneur, arts engagement specialist, and a founder and CEO of The Assembly, which unites creativity and entrepreneurship by bridging the gap between young entrepreneurs and communities in fashion and design to build businesses that can thrive and create impact. The Assembly has, to date, supported over 3,000 entrepreneurs. Joanna is passionate about pushing the agenda of social and economic development through the arts and innovation in Africa and the diaspora. She has had experience working with grassroots organizations, charities, and NGOs developing strategic partnerships between brands and charities to uplift underserved communities. So with that short introduction, yes, a round of applause to welcome Joanna. So it's great to be talking to youthful entrepreneurs, and you are doing a lot in this area of getting youths engaged. The topic today, of course, is climate change. So we'd love to hear about everything you do, but I'd like you to do a quick introduction about what you do, and particularly make sure you highlight how you're managing to get this message and activities around climate change out with the youth. Let me start with you. No, I'll start with you, Joanna, and then move to you.
I don't like starting first. But yeah, Good afternoon, everyone. Definitely an honor to be here, and thank you so much for having me. I guess I'll just start giving a brief background into the work that I do. So I'm the founder and CEO of The Assembly. We launched in 2017, and I guess for us, our focus is about upskilling and upscaling creatives in the fashion industry. And we do this through education, employment initiatives, and creating a network. And it kind of was birthed out of just working in the creative industries for a while and seeing that there wasn't really much of a platform or avenue that could help someone who probably had zero experience or zero education in whatever their vocation or interest was, and connecting them to mentorship, coaching, but most importantly, a community. And so that has been an incredible journey. And when in the question of the climate change conversation, I think with The Assembly, we see ourselves as a catalyst to host conversations just like this, but also to raise awareness on what can the business community as well as communities can do to solve issues and kind of reorientate the way that they design or the way that they do business. And so we do a number of different things. Whenever we have an incubator program or if we have some sort of training initiative, we always include sustainability topics so that it's something that is embedded in the learning. We also do a lot of social media content to kind of make it something that is accessible for the fashion community to understand ethical practices and designing with sustainability in mind. At the moment, we have a project currently, which is with the We Are campaign, and Sharon is also a part of that as well. It's basically an initiative that uses fashion and design and storytelling to bring about, just kind of raise awareness on climate change, but also from the perspective of communities, from the perspective of the everyday person. And I think that conversation needs to keep happening between not just people in positions of power or entrepreneurs, but it has to also be something that happens in tandem with local communities and people that are actually being affected by climate change on a day-to-day basis. And so through the medium of storytelling and design, we're creating this project. It's actually happening at the moment. We have workshops. We have a lot of community engagement initiatives. And it will end with a showcase to kind of say, well, this is what climate change means to us. And hopefully it can continue to add to the conversation. And not just the conversation, but I think action is what we're talking about here. So I'll probably stop there and hand over.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sheikh. So I'm privileged to start at an earlier stage of my life. I founded Footprint of David Art Foundation, a kind of a conglomerate of different social enterprises. I'm a local breed, a native of Ogun State, Ijebu to be precise, born and raised in Bariga, and I know what it is, practically know what it is when we talk about climate change or demarginalization. So I was raised in an environment where flooding, we call it Iyo in our local dialect. We live by this on a daily basis. So aside the government forgetting our areas, so some of us who pass through the Tomiland Bridge, if you look at the left-hand side where you have the Makoko, the Bariga area, that's where I was born and raised. And I know what it is for growing up in that area. So after school, I decided to go back to my community to use my art, to bring back children, and that's how I founded Footprint of David Art Foundation. Over the years, this grows into different expressions where it's majorly around children. I started a free school in the slum, where currently we cater for over 1,300 children from crèche to secondary school. We have a photo school currently, we have a fashion school, we have a community read book club, and we have a rebranding movement called my Bariga, my pride, because of course those people in Bariga, as then they tag you, say you did forget to, you be one bad boy. So personally, the media is not really helping the hood. We decided to use our tool, which is creativity and photo, precisely to, change the narrative online by getting good images of our hood and put it out there, so for people to see that there are good things that comes from Bariga as well, and we are always there flying the flags as well. So Footprint is privileged to have, bring out of the street over 7,000 children. Our focus is on children, because if the country is producing 70% of the largest population, like we've heard in the last conversation, then we are in for a big problem. So if we, the youth, are not actually taking responsibility of the future, then there's a huge problem. So we are tired of waiting for the government. We should do something. And perhaps I'm lucky to be one of those youth who have started earlier, by God's grace. In our free school now, I have children who has gone through Footprint of David, finished from several universities, polytechnics, and back into the free school as a teacher, now in the system. One of the students who have passed was, and now the head of the photo school, the head of the fashion school, as even the principal of the free slum school we have in our community. So it's so interesting to see how the youth can actually take charge and take responsibility for their community. And recently our new focus is, yes, climate change is a new anthem all over the world, but I have a problem with the way this climate change is being communicated. For example, how do we say climate justice in Yoruba? Google will say Idajo Afefe, which is, for me, rubbish. So, well, perhaps we should just ignore the terminologies and face the reality. Iyomambawa every year, meaning flooding comes every year. I was raised in an area where the water rises and come down every 6 hours. So there are seasons. Currently, if you want to come to our seaside cottage theater now, you have to go with your rain boot. We are not frowning at that because it's our way of life. But how do we make it better? So predominantly, we are designing a model where we can teach climate justice as a subject in the school. Now we are partnering with the engineering department of the University of Lagos, who have a group called SDA, Social Development Advocate, and we are developing a curriculum under the supervision of Professor Akomu to develop a curriculum where climate change, climate justice is as a curriculum, like you have to go through it, just like we have dance, theater, as a practical subject we run in our free school. So we are moving into that direction. And of course, we are in a dialogue with Lagos State government, because what we do in our school is under the supervision of Lagos Superb. And of course, you know him, your good friend, Honorable Kolade Alabi David, the chairman of Bariga CDA, is also in support of all of that. And it's an experiment that is designed for 3 years. Let's see how it comes. Then Lagos State, the governor is interested in taking it around Lagos and see how that model can serve all these underserved community as well through the Azero project. I pray they do it. But that's me, and I'm a dancer, if I had to say that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Fantastic to hear these practical things that you're both involved in. So well done. So let's dig into a few of the issues. Now, just the same as we discussed in the segment on the women driving change. The first question I asked, and you've briefly alluded to it, was this issue of communication. Now, as a former youth myself, I'm looking back and thinking about how I saw, when I was younger, these kinds of issues. And this is a question really about how the youth see things today, because there are two competing elements. As when you're young, the world is massive, it's almost impregnable. You feel, of course, nothing can really damage it that much. And also the future seems far away. So there's a tendency to want to diminish the idea of climate change and its impact. On the other side, the youth, as was said in the film, this is your birthright, this is your inheritance. So there is that motivation to look at us adults and say, you guys, you are ruining what you are, you're leaving us a mess. So in your experience working with the youth, do you see that tension between the two elements of have the youth really woken up and just simply grasped this idea that we are ruining their inheritance and getting angry and ready to act? And allied to that question is, whether or not they are, how best do we communicate these issues? What works? So let me start with you again, Joanna.
Yeah, I think it's a 50-50 situation in that on one hand you have, it isn't something that is urgent. It's not an urgent situation. We've been hearing about climate change for a long time, and it kind of like goes on each year. Yes, there may be some flooding. Yes, there may be pollution, but it's something that just continues as normal. And then on the other side, you do have young people who are being super proactive and creative in getting the message across around climate justice or climate change in whatever it means to them. And all you have to do is go on social media, and there are so many young people speaking and telling stories and showing what's happening in their local communities, to see that they are really trying to just not wait for something to happen to them. I work with a lot of young people, specifically in fashion, and a lot of designers are changing the way they're thinking about producing. So they're going away from mass production or just going to the market and buying any fabric. It's now about what do we have locally, what is local to us, what are the fabrics, what are the fibers, what are the textiles, adire, ashoke, how can we work with local artisans, how can we produce only based on an order as opposed to producing in mass. And to be honest with you, that has been something that is very common and to African fashion anyway. You go to your tailor and you order based on your need as opposed to, we're going into a shop like Zara or H&M. It's not the same similar model. So now it's really about, let's be more intentional about how we're producing and how we're creating. And so now you find there's so many examples of young people making fashion out of waste, plastic, raffia, like so many things that you would never imagine. There's so many different initiatives around vintage and secondhand clothing, and how can we use what we have, what is local to us, and add value so that yes, it's still fashion, but it's now more conscious fashion, or it's now more ethical. But obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it in terms of really understanding materials and understanding that sometimes even in trying to do good, you can actually do more harm to the environment. So there's now that kind of eagerness to understand, okay, with ink or with dye, a lot of these things are harmful. It takes a lot of water consumption. Fashion is like the biggest polluter and contributor to the climate issues that we're facing now. So it's now more about, okay, great, your heart is in the right place. You really do want to design differently or produce differently. But now let's go deeper and understand for every action, there's definitely going to be a harm. So how can we just reduce the harm so that we're not just, making for the sake of making? So I think that's probably my experience in terms of youth action and the understanding of climate change or climate justice.
Before I come to you, I just want to check something with the audience, because you see, how many of you would have thought of fashion when someone mentioned climate change and contributors towards? How many of you, be honest, please, put your hand up if you would have put fashion on that list as a significant contributor? Good. So it's not just me. I mean, I've really learned something, and it just goes to reinforce that point, that it really is literally everything that interacts with, both contributes to and is affected by climate change. And it's really fantastic to hear about, therefore, that it's something, because my next reaction is the only way to get this point across to people is to begin early and keep pushing that message. And no better place, therefore, to do it than in a school syllabus. So in addition to, answering the question about communication, maybe you tell us a bit more about, the effects of getting to them early in schools.
Okay. I think it's very essential we get the information down to the children, because it's their space we are preparing for. The future is for them, and it's good we start earlier. Coincidentally, we have a structure where we run a system for between 6 and 16. By 16, you are deliberately moved out, of the whole system that we run, so that you could go and experience other part of the world and see how well you can make use of what information is about. So deliberately, we are working with a structure where we are trying to equip these street children with a better option, and not just the la crème la pour system of our academic structure. These are a way where we do practically involve them in their day-to-day life. These are children who go for fishing even before coming to class, and also go to dump site after, experiencing class. So we have two grading systems, one for the academics and the other for those who are on hand-on craft kind of education. So we struck a synergy with where they are learning their skills, like those who are learning mechanic, painting, and every other one, apart from the artworks that we do. But of course, the art is like for the most outstanding in every other field, and that is deliberate because Footprint is originally an art-inclined stuff. So the best 10 in class are allowed to join the theater or the dance or the painting. So apologies to the science students. We believe that, math is cheap, it's formula. You can get 10-10 in math. You can't get 10-10 in summary. You can get 10-10 in chemistry, but you can't get 10-10 in painting or in drawing. So we believe art is more difficult, So we look for best 10 in each classes to join the creative, the dance, and all of that. So deliberately, we are now looking for how to structure the climate stuffs into the system where they are involved, they are aware in terms of being conscious. Don't forget our school is founded by the shore of Lagos Lagoon, where we have one of the fast-growing dump sites in Lagos. So this pollution is right in their eyes. And we had to retell them that, okay, yes, this environment where all of us did, nobody will chop all the dirty we did here, but the lagoon brings some of them. And now waiting cause our papa and mama where they go fishing, they know they see enough fish catch again. That's why they starve. And because a pet bottle is inside water. Just break it down in that local terms and tell them why is the fishes are now reducing. Why do we have this species of fish? Because we had to go practical into what they can see, which is fishing. That's what we have predominantly in our coastal line in Bariga. And so we go that way, and some of them begin to understand. And for those who are the creative, who are painting, they interpret that in painting. And recently we are campaign that Yolanda spoke about. We had a huge festival of painting, photography exhibition, interpreting all of this. And we set up what we call climate justice evangelists among these children. If those churches can go around sharing placards and say, I give a life to Christ, come to our crusade. Come on, we turn the kids into doing that and share information. Say, that dirty way we know put for dustbin where it they affect us. We go head to head like that. So we targeted those public spaces, bus stop, bar, to just go for a whole week. You are there harassing people on the street. But I'll put that dirty where no pour dirty for gutter. Those drastic, simple actions. And the children are having fun in doing it. So subconsciously, we are building this information in them, and I hope this will continue every year or, every month. So as an organization, we have our meeting points with the general public, apart from the children, every year, which is we have like 2 festivals every year, and we always ensure now that we have a sub-team that talks about climate justice.
Fantastic. And make sure you, because don't forget, we are wearing 2 hats here today. We're pre-COP, but we're also pre-AKE Arts and Book Festival. So we're with you on that message of, you know, the arts and creative endeavors, using it to propagate the message the climate change message in very imaginative ways. So I think you and AKE Arts and Book Festival, your initiative in particular, well, both of you, both creative initiatives, and you should stay close and keep in touch. So both of you have given a message also of local action. And in fact, it was the thing that impacted me most, that almost although you talk about climate change as this global effect and, you know, possibly a removed long-distance perspective, the conversation always ends up with local action. That's where the impact is, and that's where the changes are going to be made. And both of you are enthusiastically local in your activities, which is fantastic. But nevertheless, you can't do what you do without the authorities. So I'd like to learn from you a bit about both help or hindrance or just lack of interest. Is there anything optimistic with regard to involvement of government, whether it's local government or state government? Have you had help? Are they ignoring you? Are you just doing it despite them? What's your view on involvement of the policymakers?
I think our approach has always just been get on and do what you do, because, you know, whenever you do try to include government or any kind of authority, it's always long-winded and just turns unnecessarily political. So I think our approach has just been just get on with it. But definitely policy makers and the role of the government is important, especially if you want to do anything at scale and if you really want to move the needle. But unfortunately, we aren't seeing that enough. And oftentimes there's a conversation that happens over there with policymakers, and not just, it's not a Nigerian thing, it's a global thing. And then you have what's happening on a local level, and there's not enough synergy or collaboration. And so what happens is they're designing initiatives and solutions without co-designing with the people that it actually is going to affect. And so when these initiatives do not work, everybody wonders why. And it's not because it was a bad idea, but you didn't even involve the actual people that it's affecting. It doesn't make sense. You can't create solutions, and you can't sit around a table in another country deciding the fate and the future of other people if they're not also at that table. And so I think there just needs to be that kind of mindset of co-creation, co-design for us all. It's not a siloed situation. And also, like what Sharon said earlier, the language is a barrier in itself. It is very, very theoretical. It's very scientific. As you said, how do you say climate justice in Hausa, in Igbo, in whatever language? Like, what does that really mean? So it is, many people just feel kind of like, well, I'm not part of that conversation, so I'm not even going to bother or waste my time. So there is that skepticism, because every year we have these conversations, we read a lot, but it's actually not really addressing the issue, which is people are living in dangerous and unhealthy conditions simply because policymakers are not taking a holistic approach in the solutions that they're trying to create. It isn't about going with a canoe to the community and saying sorry, and then maybe sending boxes of Indomie and rice. Like, that is not what we're talking about, and it happens all the time. And then it's like, it's great on Instagram. It's amazing, you know, all the governors taking boat rides to these communities. But in actual fact, where is the research and design teams? It should be as good as your Instagram, if you ask me. So I'll let you.
I agree with you totally that we suffer from politics by posing. In other words, they address things very superficially. They get the photos short, whatever looks good and makes it look like they're addressing the issue. But you guys at the sharp end, you don't feel them at all. They come and then they use the pictures, but they disappear. So same to you, really. Anything optimistic at all about government and policy?
I don't think there is any need to even talk about the government and things like this because they don't exist. As far as I'm concerned, they don't exist by saying that we are the government. You know, the next local government chairman of my community is definitely going to come from my community. So there's no need to look at that direction.
What about the local government level? Are they getting involved and developing policies and implementing them?
The local government are puppets of the state or the federal, so they can't. I mean, I have practical examples with all of these people, and you and I have been in a meeting where we are discussing the health center of my community with the local government chairperson, and I know how it all pans out. You know, so, I mean, personally, I have decided to not discuss this with even some of my guys because now waste of time. You know, if not, why then go do drainage for our community? We be say no be every street gets drainage. Oh. The one we can't then do as drainage, they can't cover them. So people will get house, no if you do environmental, clean the drainage. And no you say, dirty go enter drainage from another place, come that place, it go come block them, come cause bigger erosion. I mean, in our areas, there are thousands of streets, right? And they managed to fix maybe 12 out of thousands. The one they fixed, they now covered it, that you have to use industrial instruments to open it, to clean it. The connecting ones are not clean. You are building one where you go still can't cover. Ticket. So even the flooding now is automated. So sometimes if those area boys where we for wood they plant, they now say if you don't they do drainage, no cover them. They go tag them, say they don't make them develop our area. But in reality, if you do drainage, we be saying a dead trap for us. You're not helping us. And you go collect money, still do the drainage halfway. I mean, sorry say they use local language, but now local topic with the talk.
I hope everybody is understanding. I'm sure I can see mostly, yes.
You know, so majorly I am saying that, yes, government always do all of those stuff. But as a youth or as anybody who wants to make something in this country, you just have to ignore them and make those decisions. Yes, policymakers, as she has said, which is key, and it transcends even the government alone, because the person we get Coca-Cola company knows, say, those plastic, they cost what? You know? And then keep on producing those PET bottles. Pure water company, keep on producing. Me, I hawk ice water way. And the ice water where I hawk, when I did small, na inside nylon. At a point, my mama said, "Mo, they put them inside bottle. Later, the bottle will go sell them to you know, and we wash it again and bring it back again. If bottle break, it don't break. But not like the effect of these plastics. Even these MTN masks, telecommunication masks that are everywhere. I mean, I feel that, yeah, if I'm to talk about the effect of the government on what we do and how we do it, is pathetic. It's really, really pathetic, you know. But at the same time, they are doing their best in the balance of governance, you know. So
it reminds me of something that happened recently. This is in the UK. So there's like a national cycling initiative that happened to encourage cycling, but also alternative ways of, you know, transportation and stuff. And I think this year, Shell sponsored the project. And people were like, make it make sense. And what happened was you found that people were like, we're boycotting, we're not involved. And that is the kind of action and intention that we as the people need to start doing. Because you can't have these big corporates doing the things that they're doing on one hand and then sponsoring initiatives because they're popular on the other hand. Like, we have to be the ones to say, call them out and say, this can't wash. But again, people say things like, well, you know, Africa is very complex, it's complicated, it's too big, and they say all of these things. But there are examples of where the government have tried in East Africa, for example, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania. They've banned the use of single-use plastics. You can't walk around with a plastic bag. You don't see nylons there. And not only did the government put that as a law, but they've actually helped companies and they've helped people get into this. So it's not just about passing a law, it's about how do we actually implement this in our everyday life? How does it make sense for me as a business owner or as a consumer? And I think that is what tends not to happen. Like, laws get passed, bills get signed, but then the implementation of it, there's no help. So it's almost like it doesn't get done. So, yeah.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to make a quick comment, but I just want to, so that you can get your thoughts together, I want to task both of you. We've talked a lot about practicality and about things that can be done, and I'd love us to go away from here beginning to think about how we can begin to become part of the change, whether it's on a personal level or wider. So I'm going to ask you both to talk to that. But while you're just thinking, I just wanted to make the point that one of the things that we can all do, and I think we should all do, is to address this tragic situation which has been highlighted by Sheikh, which is that you eventually give up on government. They make you do it. They frustrate you into just saying, you know what, I'm just going to work with the area that I can impact, the area that I can control. But my answer is that we can't, my response to that is that we can't really give up. The more impact we have and the better we're doing, the more important it is for local and state authorities to understand its value, to take what they can from it in terms of lessons for development of policy and try and multiply or encourage the same thing to happen elsewhere. In other words, almost the better the job you're doing, the more important it becomes to catch the attention of the authorities so that the good things, the impactful actions can be spread around and the word can travel so that people can begin to make that difference on a grander scale, because at the end of the day, we've seen that, you know, climate change really has such a universal impact on all of us. So going from that, let me come back to you guys. And, you know, if someone just walked up to you and said, look, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough to begin to try and make a change. What can I get involved with? What can I do in my personal life? Who can I go and link hands with and join them in what they're doing? Anything off the top of your head that can just stimulate, give ideas for people, also the people watching online, you know, how they can get involved in making a difference. Let me start with you.
I think, first of all, start with your local community, because sometimes this whole conversation can be very overwhelming and you can actually feel helpless because it's like, this is a very major issue that we're living through. It's not going to come, we're actually living through it. And then you can just kind of feel like, you know what, it's too much for me, and step back. I know I felt like that many times. But whatever you feel that comes natural to you, it could be creativity, it could be storytelling, it could be singing, it could be gathering people in your local community to do regular cleans, it could be planting seeds, it could be like, there's so many ways in which you can find what comes natural to you to do that. It could be buying less, it could be making an effort to buy locally and to ensure that what you're buying, there's, you know, there's some kind of sustainable value or intention behind it. It could be educating a small group of children around, or volunteering. There are so many different initiatives that, you know, one can volunteer. Yeah, I think off my mind, that's probably what I would say.
What do we fit do?
What we do simple now. I need plenty, but because it's too simple and too plenty, we dey ignore it. You know, on a larger scale, we may not do a lot, but on a smaller scale, start from your family. You know, if you know, say, you buy bread and you take 2 nylon. If you know if you use your hand carry the bread, if you use 1 nylon, instead of, you know, they go time for 1 nylon, then we can't give another, we go take carry him, you know. If you reduce one, as little as that, you are contributing a lot, you know. Instead of you to have one big party, you know, and you want to form posh, I know say this our event now, table water go down there 1 corner. You know, if we all of us come here now, 1 form, go take table water. Instead of maybe I use dispenser and use disposable cup, paper one. You know, I mean, all of those little things matters. Then reduce the amount of wig they buy. You don't buy many before, you don't use them again. Some of those wig now, elastic. I mean, I know what wig they cost, or those attachments. They cut chicken leg for my hood. You know, I mean, those are just little things that you alone can decide not to. And if you do it, I do it, all of us start doing it, the thing will reduce. Oh. Thank you.
Thank you. Louder. Thank you. Now, as I mentioned, we're connected to this event is related to 2 major events. Of course, the bigger one is the COP that's going to be coming up very shortly in Egypt. I don't know if you bother to follow closely because, again, some of these things are just the way we look at government, you know, talk, and is it going to result in action, etc. But if you've been paying attention, and either of you can, or both of you can address this, do you have any particular expectations, something you're wanting to see, somebody you're wanting to hear, something that should happen as a result of this COP, which, after all, is happening this time in Africa? So is that anything that you've thought about or concerned yourself with?
Shall I let you put that one first?
Yeah, yes. I was even wanting to say that. So there's one thing that is very key for me to share, and I'm looking forward at COP27. Anyway, most likely me and Yolanda is going to be there, either physically or by our walks. I mean, we've had serious conversations back and forth on this topic. And one thing that I am looking forward to see at COP27 this year is to see Africa well represented. Enough of Africa need aid, we need help, and then they, you know, donate some money and all of that. We need our stories to be told by ourselves, not one person. We don't know as what they affect us, can't tell our story. I mean, it's sad to see how African stories are being told by non-Africans. It's a different feeling. It's a almost different interpretation. So looking forward to COP27, African stories being told by Africans through the African lens to avoid misrepresentation.
Very true. And over to you.
I think I'll just add storytelling, absolutely, but then also these are our solutions. So it's like made by us for us. It's not, you know, what someone designed in California and saying this is how Africans should tackle the issue. This is what we're doing, and this is how we can actually teach you. We can actually show you we're just as knowledgeable, you know. Oftentimes it's always one-sided. It's always from a Eurocentric lens on what is for us. So for me, it's about just telling our stories, absolutely, but then these are also things that we can contribute to the global conversation as tangible solutions to the climate change.
Thank you. So we're almost getting to the question and answer session as we round up. So just to remind, especially those watching online, if you have any questions, you can send them in on the chat and we'll try and get them addressed. But before we get to the Q&A, one final question from me, which is really to help us to help you. So can you, each of you, choose, you know, one or two, just briefly, one or two of your new initiatives that you're getting involved in that either we should keep an eye on, maybe online where we can see it and get to learn about it, and more importantly, how we can, anybody out there who is minded can help. So if both of you, again, I'll start with you,
Okay.
one or two.
So I mentioned this earlier. We currently have a project called Traces, and it's an initiative to raise awareness on climate change and climate injustice through storytelling and design. And you can check that out. We'll be doing like daily updates on how that's progressing. On Instagram, our handle is Assembly Official, and our website is www.theassemblyhub.com. It's very easy to find us. Yeah.
And what are the types of help you want people to bring? I mean, obviously, the finance would be there, but
money.
In addition to the money.
Money is always good, but also just engaging and just sharing us with your own experiences as well, because it is a community, and I think it's better when we're all talking and engaging. If anything resonates with you, share with your friends, your own communities, and
Community. Okay, so for me, the greatest help anyone can do for me now is to help push the hashtag, My Bariga, My Pride. I look for any good images that you can